Right, you're on.
Perfect. Okay. So for this fly, you're basically going to need, well, I'm using a Knapbeck dry fly hook, size 8. But you can tie it, obviously, any size that you want the caddis to be. So the size 8 is just easier to see tonight. Tonight I'm going to use yellow foam. You can use, obviously, green, brown, black. The original was tied black with basically cow elk hair, and then normally like a brown hackle. So this version is gonna be like a hackleless fly. So take the hackle out the equation. These days that's quite a good thing because it's difficult to get good hackle actually. And for presentation purposes, we're adding some CDC, just brown, or there's various colors you can look at. On the Vaal, I've used this fly on the Vaal actually, and I tie like with a chartreuse green and brown, and those two have done quite well. So basically you'll just start with thread. You can pretty much use what you prefer. I mean, I'm just using a weird color here, but it's a 12-aught Vivus thread. So, I normally prefer a flat thread because you're tying, like if you tie a twisted thread or something like that, then it actually cuts through the foam and it just stuffs up the hair and stuff like that. So a normal flat thread is a good one to use. So yeah, you'll basically start at the eye of the hook. It's a very quick fly to tie as well, and I'm quite a lazy fly tie. Just put on a little bit of a base there. I would say don't go past halfway, because this fly is predominantly going to sit pretty much in the front. Most of the fly is going to be open. Now, there's various hooks that you can use, but any dry fly hook that's a fairly short shank and a nice gape. So I use this for both yellowfish and trout. It's a nice fly also to take to Sterkfontein, I would say. It can pretty much imitate a hopper, a caddis. I think sometimes even a beetle, because it just looks like a looks like a mess basically. So you can take this. If it's a small CDC feather, you can just tie in the whole feather. If it's a big one, you can pretty much stroke the feathers to the side, strip some off, and just tie them in. But I think it's a lot easier just to take a whole feather. So you'll see a lot of packets. I'm using Polish CDC. And in this packet's quite nice because there's quite a few sizes. So I normally just let the fibers just stick past the bend. It just presents a bit softer than just the foam version. You can tie this also quite thick if you want, but I basically just tie it in for a bit of movement and a bit of presentation purposes. You can pretty much just use like 1-2 turns. Then I like to just fold it under the CDC in the front, and then just one last turn, and that locks it in. You can cut off the waist. Then you can take your whichever color foam you want. This is going to be a bright yellow. Now in the Rhodes area, there's actually you get little stone flies there. So this is quite a nice, what they call a yellow Sally imitation as well. So a lot of times I use yellow because it's just easy to see as well. So you basically measure, it must be slightly smaller than the gape of the hook. So, okay. So this is going to be basically slightly shorter than the CDC. So, okay. You can pretty much just, oh shit. I normally just pinch it so that you've got some grip tied in.
How wide is it? Just more than the hook gape?
Yeah, just, I would say about... Yeah, about the gape. You can go a bit, but you can trim it. You can maybe go probably like 3/4 or so, but it depends. Sometimes you get Caddis that's kind of like out there, but most of them are, like the body is normally very short, and then the wing is quite long. So it just depends what you're imitating. But you can chop and change this. Like you can even tie this as a hopper, because you can, for example, tie in some legs when you actually get to the end. You can pretty much run about there. I'm going to cut that off. The other day I actually saw a nice version that they leave this and they just tie in a hackle there. Quite a nice. And some people cut in a V. So you can, afterwards I'm just going to trim the edges. You don't have to. The original, they just leave square. So you can tie about, don't use a lot of turns, because with a dry fly you want to keep it simple. Just lock it in. You can just trim the waist off and then kind of just taper that in. I think my spacing might be a little bit off with this fly. So there's going to be, you want to, when you tie in the wing, we're pretty much going to start a little bit, a few millimeters forward. Because if you tie it in too close, it kind of flares too much. So at this stage it's going to be quite similar to a elk and CDC, or CDC and elk. So I like to use natural cow elk hair, basically. Never use the bleach stuff, because that just breaks. So you can pretty much, it's a bit difficult to guess this, but I normally just kind of like with the eye, kind of like the width of the foam. So you, okay. So you can just take out all the fluff from the elk hair. It's quite important to get rid of that, because it kind of like sinks the fly. Now what's nice about this fly, you don't really have to add floatant ever. What I normally do, if I add, I just add a little bit to the wing, the top wing, but because the foam is actually going to sit flat on the water, and this makes actually I would say for yellowfish it's a very good fly, because I found that often yellowfish, when they come up, if the fly is not kind of like sitting in the film, it's a very high riding fly. That's why when you take the hackle away, a hackle fly sits too high in the water, and I don't know, like sometimes it looks like they almost like can't take it. So you can just put this in a stacker. Just align the tips. Okay. It's quite an important step to do that, just to get all the tips quite even. Now I'm still gonna cut the foam a little bit, so the tips is just gonna go slightly past, and then once you get at this stage, I like to just measure it, swap fingers, and then kind of like just leave about 3 or 4 millimeters where I'm going to tie it in, and just kind of cut it all the waste off at that stage. I don't like cutting it at a later stage. So you can pretty much lock this in with about 4 turns. Now you do it, you basically do 1 turn, second turn, just hold on. I like to pull it kind of forward, otherwise the torque of the string will actually wrap it all around. And once you've got two wraps, you just cut it through the front section of it. And then you can just here you go. And then you can pretty much just finish it off. So you can make 1 or 2 turns in front of that, and then let's do a whip finish. Okay, and then let's snip it off. Here you go. That's it. This is probably quite a bushy one, but yeah. And then you can just trim the kind of like the rough, just to make it a little bit rounded. And then maybe just, I don't think this is really necessary, but just looks a little bit more, just like pinch it a little bit, that. And that's it.
You turn it around 90 degrees.
Okay.
No, rotary, right?
Well, you can. So, yeah. So what you can do also with this fly, when you can actually tie it in there and just trim this all off, and then actually just dab some CDC on it, like, and then dab a head of CDC. So, or you can split thread CDC and make a collar where it has a bit of a CDC hackle. And the original fly would actually have quite a substantial hackle in front of this without the CDC, so it's quite a high water fly, I would say. So, but then you'll start quite further back in the fly and have quite a big hackle. So, yeah.
Yeah, also the thing that's nice with the flies is you can also just trim the base of it out. So if you feel that it's riding too high and fish aren't eating it,
Yes.
trim the base and the hackle off. And then it still sits nicely because the side hackle are holding it up on the surface, but then it actually sits low.
Yes. What I often do is I tie the two that I normally tie is the CDC with the CDC dubbing, and then I tie the one with the hackle if I get like very fast water, but the one with the hackle is quite nice to suspend some nymphs underneath, and that's also quite a nice pattern for the Vaal, I would say, because on the Vaal, like you've got a big river, so it just floats a lot better. So yeah, perfect.
Now that the water's been cleaner, these patterns are actually working very well.
So do you use the hackle instead of the LP or is it in front of the LP?